The Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics and Knightsbridge Overland.
This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique vehicles in their showroom located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles. Thanks, Commonwealth Classics, for your continued support of the podcast.
The Centresteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the Centresteer podcast, podcast number 115 for October 2022. Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. I'm your host, John Costage. Joining me over Zoom is Morgan. Welcome, Morgan.
Hello. Thanks for having me, as always. I hope everybody is, at least here in Vermont, I'm enjoying this unseasonably warm weather mixed with the foliage, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Are you past peak on your leaves, deciduous leaves changing color?
Yes, we are. It was probably about a week ago, and then we had a bunch of rain, and now it's like 75. It's nice to have unseasonably warm weather in Vermont right now, but I understand that everybody else has had unseasonably warm weather, and it's not so nice.
The leaves here, and it's the only time of year I get to use the word deciduous. I think that's correct, right? The leaves that actually do change color are deciduous trees. If I'm not mistaken, they're not the evergreens.
Correct.
It's the only time you can use the word deciduous. Leaf changing was really great this year, especially in Western Pennsylvania. In fact, I had to drive up to Cortland, New York, preview weekend of the Jubilee that's coming up. We were doing some meeting up there, checking out the site. New York and Western Pennsylvania, Eastern, Northeast Pennsylvania, and Central New York. Fantastic. It was a great time of year to.
Yes, I had a work trip down to Newport, Rhode Island last weekend, and it was same kind of thing, driving through Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, all during the peak foliage. Cannot complain.
Harold and Dixon are not able to join us this evening. They're off doing whatever it is Harold and Dixon do. I know Dixon said he was involved in a board meeting for Placid Lassie. And for this podcast, we have two returning Expedition and Overlanders. First, it is Jan and Alec Forman, who traveled 40,000 miles through 29 countries in 1977. You may recall they were on episode 44 of the podcast back in December of 2016. Wow. I have to pause on that one. That's like talking about Land Rovers that go 3 digits fast on the speedometer. Just thinking about that was episode 44. Wow. Yeah. And they wrote a book called Strangers Like Angels. And Jan and Alec are back with their son, Charles. They want to restore their historic and well-traveled Series 3, and they tell us of their plans and how you can be a part of it. And secondly is Alex Bescoby of Last Overland fame. He was on episode 75 in July of 2019. Wow, what's that, 3 years ago? Wow, time has no meaning anymore, does it?
Certainly over the last 3 years.
Alex previews the book and TV show of the same name, The Last Overland, and it's about Oxford's triumphant return overland journey from Singapore. If you didn't know that by now, it's probably you're a first-time listener to the podcast. Go back to the annals of our podcast library and listen about Oxford in America and first overland and now last overland. Thank you for listening, and a big thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. We appreciate your support. Visit our website to see how you can support the podcast. You can do it as a Patreon supporter. You can buy a shirt or a sticker, buy us a tee, which is just like Patreon, but you get to choose the amount. And as a bonus for Patreon supporters, most guests answer our 10 questions, which is a quick fire question and answer round. And we post that exclusively for our Patreon listeners. And a special thanks to Bob of Brown Water fame. That's actually what we should call him now, Bob of Brown Water fame. He provided us with more brown water and commented for last month. It just doesn't get any better than this. Bruce and Mike which is Mike McKay. They put it together. That's why I call him Mike. Both legends. Thank you for bringing them together on your podcast. Brown water all around. Thanks, Bob.
Yes, thanks, Bob.
Here we go, Morgan. This is your monthly reminder that 2023, see, told you time, not having any meeting anymore, is Land Rover's 75th anniversary. We're inviting all Land Rover owners to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in July of 2023, especially Series and Defender owners. You have, call it out, Morgan, how many months?
8 months.
You are correct, sir.
8 short months.
They are short to get your Rover ready.
The problem is really most of them around here are winter months, which are not as productive.
And also the shortest month, Anarch's Diamond Jubilee will take place June 15th through the 18th in 2023 at Greek Peak Mountain Resort in Cortland, New York. Registration will open later in November, so keep an eye out for that. I'll be sure to announce it through the podcast. Because I'm, I guess, on the Anarch board, we have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. We are on Instagram. Of course, all the other clubs will push out information when it's officially announced. The anticipation is November 15th. That's the planned announcement date, when registration will open for the event. And now for the news. Lower UK and Europe sales for JLR fail to offset China and North American gains. So lower sales in the UK and Europe fail to offset gains in China and North America for JLR during its latest quarter. The automotive giant, which has UK operations in the Midlands and Northwest, has reported retail sales for the 3 months to end of September 2022 of 88,121 vehicles, an increase of 9,296 compared with the previous quarter ending in June. JLR added that compared to the first quarter, retail sales were higher in China, North America, and overseas, but were lower in the UK and Europe. China was up 38%, North America up 27%, overseas up 14%, the UK was down 7%, and Europe was down 10%. The manufacturer also said that wholesale volumes were 75,307 cars in the period. That excludes its China joint venture. That's up 4% compared to the previous quarter. JLR said, quote, "This improvement was lower than planned, primarily due to a lower than expected supply of specialized chips from one supplier, which could not be readily resourced in the quarter. This was mitigated partially by further prioritization of production to the highest margin products, Range Rover, while new agreements with semiconductor suppliers are expected to enable sales improvements in the second half of the fiscal year," unquote. At least I assume it was the Range Rover.
How could it not be?
Well, the Defender, I think, is probably a high margin vehicle now.
True. But still, you can crank up the Range Rover prices much higher than you can the Defender prices.
And JLR went on to say that production ramp up of the new Range Rover and new Range Rover Sport improved with 13,537 cars in the quarter, up from 5,790 in the first quarter. That's a significant increase. It also said that it is expected to continue to improve in the second half of its financial year. As of the end of September 2022, the total order book has grown to 205,000 units. That's up 5,000 from the end of June. So yeah, it looks like from the end of June to the end of September, they now have a backlog of 205,000 units. So it's gone up 5,000 from the end of June to the end of September. And they go on to say the demand for the new Range Rover, new Range Rover Sport, and Defender remains strong, accounting for over 145,000 of those 205,000 orders. I mean, that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. As long as they can, get the chips, which of course everybody is still struggling with, and hopefully they've manufactured enough green oval badges, because I don't know if you heard about Ford. They have a whole bunch of vehicles stuck in the lots because they don't have enough blue oval logos.
Really? I did not hear that.
And of course, no self-respecting car manufacturer would ship their vehicles without logos.
No. Well, that might explain. My uncle ordered a new Ranger pickup, and he's been waiting for it for months. So maybe that's part of the problem, is they didn't have enough badges for it.
Right.
He's almost 90 years old, been a car guy all his life, and he will only drive Fords. You don't get in between him and his Fords. That's what he drives. See, he did some racing back in the 40s and 50s, and he was a mechanic. Actually, a really interesting guy. All of a sudden I've gone off on that tangent, but he was at cryptographic service. Spent time in Korea during the end of the war. I don't know that, I don't recall if there was fighting going on, but he was in Korea. And
wow,
he's one of those guys who we didn't know about it until about 20 years ago. Never said a word.
Right.
like barely even said he was in the military. Just said I was overseas, and he always hated planes. He would not fly. So when you mentioned Ford, I immediately think of my uncle, Jim, who, a Ford guy, although he did have a blue and a red, International Scouts. I remember those back when I was a kid. He had two of those, and those were cool. Those were cool vehicles. I remember riding in those. At least one. I think
those are very cool.
Yeah, one was a donor vehicle. I think so, because apparently they rusted like in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, moving on to the news, JLR North America has a new marketing chief, Charlotte Blank. They have announced that Charlotte Blank is its new chief marketing officer as the British automaker continues to electrify its entire fleet of vehicles. Miss Blank was previously director of transformation and analytics at the company, creating a new center of excellence overseeing organizational transformation, CRM, market research, and data analytics to help drive JLR reimagined journey in North America. And Joe Eberhardt says, who's the president and CEO of JLR North America, Charlotte is a highly experienced and transformational marketing leader with deep experience in leading brand and portfolio transformation. We welcome her leadership of the marketing operation as we reimagine the future of modern luxury, I'm emphasizing that, through our distinct global brands. In her role, Ms. Blank will run the Mahwah, New Jersey-based JLR U.S. marketing strategy and operations, including a transformation and analytics function. She will report directly to Eberhardt. Oh, so she's keeping the transformation analytics function and adding in the marketing chief function.
Interesting. That's a pretty a very good combination, because these days marketing is very much about analytics. Especially so much of the marketing is digital online marketing, and that's
targeting specific audiences. And
yeah,
she did work for General Motors for a period of time. She was in the marketing arm. They didn't say where, but she at least has some previous automotive experience.
Cool. Congrats to her.
Next, consider Land Rover's Destination Defender and Upmarket JeepFest. I love the title, so that's why we had to do this one. This is from Top Speed. For those who prefer Bordeaux over Busch Light and Mozart to Molly Hatchet, Land Rover will debut Destination Defender, a gathering of Defender owners and enthusiasts for a modern outdoor lifestyle weekend, November 12th through the 13th in Saugerties, I'm not sure how you say that, New York. Consider it JeepFest or Jeep Beach, with perhaps less debauchery and a clientele that is less likely to be hosing off beer-laced vomit from their campgrounds. Land Rover states guests will experience Defender-centric adventure activities, classic Defender model displays, vendors with an array of the automaker's swag, and overnight camping, glamping at the festival grounds. The event will also serve as a host for the Defender Service Awards celebration on November 12th. Featuring dinner, live music, special guest appearances, and the announcement of award winners for U.S. and Canadian organizations making a difference in their communities. A total of $125,000 will be donated, and each of the 5 winning organizations in each category will receive a new Defender 130 model. There's a VIP weekend and one-day passes are available. One-day passes start at $50, while those who want to go all out can spring for the VIP experience with full access to the grounds throughout the weekend and preferential access to activities and experiences. Didn't see a cost for the VIP, but they only gave a price for the one-day pass.
That sounds like fun. It's certainly, quite the opposite from from the like Easter Jeep Safari or something like that, which is usually, that's what, Moab usually.
I think there's something around Moab. I think they also do something up in the Pacific Northwest too, don't they? It's not the Rubicon Trail, right?
Right.
It sounds like a nice activity combined with them announcing their service award winners, which I think is a good idea, because in the past they've just announced them.
a little bit of glamping is probably not a bad thing for November in New York State.
They better have heaters.
Yes. Well, and of course, anybody, come winter romp is welcome to camp in Maine if they prefer, but, you don't have to.
Except the VIP experience there's a little different.
Considerably, yes.
Next, I'm going to read this entire article because I found it fascinating, even though it involves defects and it involves lawyers. Jaguar responds to claims of defective Defender windshields. Now, they actually got the title wrong because technically it's JLR North America. But JLR North America has filed a response to the class action lawsuit alleging that 2020 and 2022 Defender vehicles contain defective windshields. The vehicle manufacturer argues that in the U.S. District Court of New Jersey should dismiss a complaint for a number of reasons, including that the complaint does not actually identify a specific defect. According to the court documents, plaintiffs allege that Land Rover knew that Defenders contained one or more defects in the way vehicles are manufactured and or made that can cause the windshield to crack, chip, and or fracture. According to the complaint filed by the plaintiffs, Land Rover would have known of the alleged defect through pre-production testing, pre-production design, failure mode, and analysis data, production design failure mode and analysis data, early consumer complaints, and more. The plaintiffs propose the alleged issue results from the usage of deficient materials in the construction of the windshield or deficiency in the structure of the vehicle. The lawsuit alleges that Land Rover will not cover the repair or replacement of those windshields under warranty, and that replaced windshields are also defective. That's my emphasis added there. In October, JLR filed its response with the court arguing that all claims should be dismissed. Quote, first, the complaint does not identify defects. At most, it identifies symptoms of some unintended defect, but the alleged windshield cracks are also consistent with a non-defective windshield. This failure to identify defect is fatal to all the plaintiffs' claims, unquote. JLR says the plaintiffs claim their windshields cracked, at which time they make the unsupported leap that the windshields must not have been strong enough due to deficient materials, or a deficiency in the structure of the class vehicles. In addressing the allegation of statutory fraud, JLR says plaintiffs' claims do not address the who, what, when, where, and why an alleged fraud of the alleged fraud and should therefore be dismissed per court precedent. Additionally, JLR argues that plaintiffs' claims also lack specificity with respect to the allegation that Land Rover failed to inform customers of the reported issue. JLR says, quote, plaintiffs do not identify any source of information that should have contained the disclosure they seek, unquote. Continuing its argument, we're about done. JLR says the allegations regarding the pre-release testing, data, and more are not supported by asserted facts. And the vehicle manufacturer tells the court that the limited warranty does not include damage caused by objects striking the windshield, nor does it cover damage caused by design defects. Yes, heavy emphasis added by me. So let me see. The warranty doesn't cause an object striking the windshield. I can kind of see that. Okay. But the warranty doesn't cause damage caused by a design defect. Then why do we have a warranty?
Yeah. Warranty only covers a defective part, not a bad design. That seems...
But the part is not defective because something struck it, and there's certainly no design element. There's no design problem. There's no deficient materials. And of course, this is one I get to bring up, and too bad Dixon's not here. 5 windshields on the Freelander. 5. Those were covered under warranty. I had to pay for 1. I think 4 got covered under warranty. I think it was after like the second one I figured it out. If you use the heated windscreen and turn that on, I think it expanded. This is my supposition that the heat caused it to expand, and then the cavity wasn't big enough and it popped because it always cracked in the top right above the rear view mirror, right in the middle.
Ooh, gotcha. That's where they learned their lesson and decided to not cover windshield repairs.
That was their answer. Yes, we have defective windshields, so let's not cover them. All right, let's move on. The world's whitest paint can now be used to naturally cool cars and planes. So last year, and that is Gizmodo, reported on the research being done at Purdue to develop a white paint with extreme reflectivity, which has actually been many years in the making. In the fall of 2020, the team successfully developed a white paint that's able to reflect 95.5% of light. And just a few months later, they bested that the new paint formulation that could reflect up to 98.1% of light. The Whitest paints that are currently commercially available only reflect about 80 to 90% of light, which means they're absorbing 10 to 20% of it. And we all know from regrettable summer wardrobe choices that reducing light and heat absorption is a big part of keeping cool when it's hot out. And there's some technical stuff in here about the different kinds of paint, but skip to this paragraph. In a paper recently published in the Cell Reports Physical Science Journal, it was revealed that using hexagon boron nitrate, a substance mostly used in lubricants instead of barium sulfite, resulted in a white paint with 97.9% solar reflectance from an application thickness of just 0.15 millimeters. The new formulation was also highly porous and weighed 80% less than the previous paint made from barium sulfite while achieving nearly the same amount of light reflectance. In that article, early on, it said that the barium sulfite, they had to put it on very thick. I'm trying to find that number. 0.4 millimeters thick, which apparently is very heavy. You can only put that on houses effectively because it didn't make sense to put on a car, which is lighter. And of course, you want less weight on a car. So apparently this new hexagon boron nitrate. So that might be cool. Say, Harold, there's a good reason for white paint.
Yeah. And of course, Harold has a white 130.
Yes, he does. He does now have a white 130. That's right.
I know it's not his preferred color, but yes, reflecting some of that extra heat that we've got around right now, it's not a bad idea. And to the weight, thickness and weight, my guess is part of, you don't want to add that much weight to a vehicle because the entire vehicle is covered in paint. But my guess is part of it also has to do with the flexibility of the paint, because automotive body panels tend to flex a bit, and the thicker you paint, the more likely it is to crack.
Well, vehicles are designed to flex, period. They need to go over different surfaces, especially Land Rovers going over rougher surfaces.
Yeah. Now, of course, the Land Rovers have, at least the current generation of Land Rovers have some of the most rigid bodies of vehicles out there. It's not like a traditional pickup truck with a C-channel frame that, flexes significantly. Most people don't realize how thin the layers of paint are on vehicles. You generally have, most of it is primer, then you've got like a fairly thin coat of the actual color paint, then maybe you've got some flex, and then the rest is all like clear coat.
What I would have liked to have seen in this article they didn't mention was put it on a vehicle and then do the comparison between, say, standard paint, this paint, and then tell me what is the temperature inside. I realize maybe some of that's just is glass, really. So further thinking about it here out loud, yeah, maybe it's mostly probably the glass than it is the actual painted surface. Because that's, glass lets in a lot of that heat.
Does, and with the trend that Land Rover is certainly a part of having the sort of panoramic glass roofs, that lets in a lot more heat. Now, most of those, like at least the roof, panoramic roof glass, has very high UV protection in it compared to like your windscreen and rear window and side glass, but yeah, it's still that is most likely where the majority of the heat comes in. Good old greenhouse effect.
All right, let's move on to this alternative to rubber could transform how tires are made. The tire company Bridgestone has been researching and studying. Oh, I'm going to get the word wrong here. They even tell you how to say it. It's spelled Guayaule. It's pronounced Waiuli, although it looks like Guayul, or for you Stargate SG-1 fans out there, it looks like, I want to say Guauld. Let's see if I can say this now. I'll say it correctly. Bridgestone has been researching and studying Waiuli production on a commercial scale. Bridgestone plans to invest another $42 million towards operations to expand the program. Waiuli, grown in North America, faces no transoceanic supply chain issues, is far less labor intensive than Hevia to grow and harvest, and gives farmers a low water use and a naturally pest-resistant local crop. That makes it a compelling alternative as water allocations get slashed in face of climate change, aerification, and mega droughts. which has dropped lake levels along the Colorado River to historic lows. And since Waioli grows in areas too hot and dry for most farming, it doesn't displace food crops. Bridgestone aims to sell tires with Waioli rubber by 2030 and already started tire testing in the most venerable of laboratories, IndyCar racing.
Nice.
Apparently it's a seed from a plant.
Yeah, because there's just so much. I mean, ever since the discovery of the rubber plant and the rubber it produces, it's been a bit of a process to get that rubber. Interesting that they have something that will especially work here in North America to grow.
They have a nice chart here about what's in a tire. So apparently figures vary, particularly with a mix of natural versus synthetic rubber. High-load trucks tires use more natural rubber, while passenger car and racing tires have less. So natural rubber, which is the Hevia or Uwili, did I say that right, is 28%. Synthetic rubber, which is engineered petrochemical, 23%. Fillers, carbon black, silica, 26%. Steel, that's the belts and beaded wires, 15%, miscellaneous chemicals, 5%, and textiles, 3%.
Yeah, and, some of the series Land Rover owners might understand the differences between, the traditional rubber, which is generally used for like bushings and stuff like that, which are a much harder, much longer lasting rubber than, at this point. Yeah, they'll usually use a modern chemical compound for bushings and stuff, which just don't last as long, but you get a much softer ride until they wear out. So that's why, commercial vehicles tend to use more of the natural rubber versus, the synthetic rubbers in more civilian vehicles type situations where a smoother ride is preferred over longevity of the tire.
All right, next up, the Ineos Grenadier starts production, and this is from Jalopnik, so it's got attitude. It's been about 5 years since B-tier Brosnan-era Bond villain Jim Ratcliffe announced plans to build his own version of the ancient Land Rover Defender. The Ineos Grenadier is now officially in production, according to Motor One. Built at a former Mercedes-Benz factory in France, the Grenadier really does appear to be an off-road enthusiast dream. It's true body-on-frame SUV, with the U.S. version getting full-time four-wheel drive, live front and rear axles, locking center differential, different modes for off-roading and wading through water, front and rear skid plates, steel wheels, and several other adventure-friendly features. Customers who want something even more rugged can upgrade to the Trailmaster Edition. It is the first time we've heard about different trim levels. So the Trailmaster Edition, that adds, among other things, a snorkel, a ladder, auxiliary battery, and an oh-so important branded jacket. The optional Rough Pack adds locking front and rear differentials, all-terrain KO2 tires, while the luxury-oriented Smooth Pack throws in stuff like a backup camera, puddle lights, ambient interior lighting, heated mirrors, heated windshield washer fluid nozzles, which actually are not as luxury as you think they are. So then there's also a Fieldmaster Edition. Power comes from a BMW Source 3-liter inline 6 that makes 282 horsepower, 332 pound-feet of torque. Sadly, there's no manual transmission. The Grenadier only gets an 8-speed ZF automatic. U.S. pricing has yet to be announced, but expects to be surprisingly reasonable. In the UK, the most basic Grenadier starts at £49,000, but the cheapest edition that will be coming to the US starts at £52,000. And they say that's about in line with the base price of a Defender 90 in the UK. So doing some rough back-of-the-napkin math, expect the base version to start around $55,000. In the UK only, though, Ineos estimates it will begin delivering Grenadiers to customers in December. They do not yet have a date for US customers.
Oh, bummer. Next year.
But it's interesting. It's like basically around the price of a Defender. So I guess some of the discussion had, at least on the new Defender, had been it's expensive. Well, now and people have been saying, why can't they have just done like Jeep did and make a modern version of the same truck virtually? Well, that seems like that's what Grenadier's kind of doing. Guess what? It's the same price. So yeah, I mean, that's not everything, of course, in the Defender name, but it's just,
right.
It's just interesting. You think it would be maybe, even 10 grand cheaper, but nope.
Well, and I think part of it too, of course, is that we all would have loved to have a modernized Defender, and it to remain a Defender with all the same features, but that's not Land Rover's target market anymore.
And as I've said previously, they didn't do it when they could. So
Yep.
some decision was made by someone somewhere, maybe repeatedly, to not invest in the truck much. You look at my 1987, you look at a 2016, you'll be hard pressed. I think the casual let's say the non-Land Rover enthusiast, I think would go, yeah, same vehicle.
Yeah, definitely.
I was out yesterday, actually at my local brewery, and there was a really nice Ford Mustang from the 70s, like just sharp looking car. And then they were guessing what year it was. And then I could hear them in earshot, but they came over to me and said, "So what's your vehicle?" I'm like, "Oh, good. I'm glad you're asking me about mine." But anyway, I told them they were taking bets at the table. There's like 3 or 4 of them. And the guesses were 1930s, I think a 50s, and I think a 70s, somewhere in there. It's like 3 of them. And I was like, "Nope, 87." Like, yeah, well, there you go.
What are they using? The Price is Right rules? Can't guess over?
Closest without going over. I'm not sure what happened there. Yeah, honestly. Well, then they made the fatal mistake of asking me more about my truck. And so I spent 20 minutes.
Good. They earned it.
About 25-year rules and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have this 3 articles kind of go together. First up is Land Rover Trek, not for the faint of heart. This article, and then there's also a video following it. But this is one, I'm not going to read you this article, but if you want to know, well, actually read the intro. That's what I should do. It sounds so easy sitting at home. Head to Jaguar Land Rover's head office in New Jersey, pick up a fully dudded limited edition Defender 110 and head off-roading. For someone who embraces a sedentary lifestyle, the 3-kilometer run that included a hill climb, balance beam, lugging 20-liter water barrels, and clambering over a 1.5-meter wooden wall, it was a rude awakening, and this task was just to get the blood pumping. It's part of something called Trek, an exercise used by Land Rover to teach dealer, personnel, teamwork, and problem-solving skills while experiencing the ability and versatility of the vehicles they sell. The event takes place over a grueling 24-hour period that includes camping and a cookout. Of course, as the brain tire, so does the ability to think logically, which made the tricky task more difficult and a test of perseverance. And then the article goes on. This was written by a Canadian from driving.ca. So if you want to know more about the Trek competition, you can read that and the art and the activities that take place. And then there's also companion to that, because the Fast Lane also competed in that Trek challenge, Defender off-road challenge, and except this is a video they put together and it's about 13 minutes, and so you can, not only can you read about the activities, you can see what the activities were, and it's not all driving either. It's there's I read earlier, there's some physical challenges to it.
Yes, they try to make it like a very, very slimmed down miniature, much simpler camel trophy type.
Yeah. Or event. I think maybe more G4s probably maybe you're right. Maybe is more,
because the camel trophy was very much like you start with all the physical activities and then you have the driving activities and then they send them off.
Right.
It's just condensed down to a 24-hour event instead of.
These were also media types, so they weren't like Bill Burke all primed to go off and do all these challenges.
Right. Yeah.
And then there was also the Defender Trophy, which is this takes place also in North America. It looks like it takes place on the same property. They do the same things. But if you want to read about that, I recommend you go out and do that. And that was I think that's the one where if you buy the Defender Trophy vehicle, then you get to go on to this Defender Trophy challenge. But they had some vehicles held back that then they let some automotive journalists take on the journey. This is the one where I love the sand glow, or at least reminiscent of sand glow paint, and it has Defender Trophy on the side, but the white bonnet still, no. What were you doing, Land Rover? That just is not a good look. It's just not a good look.
Yeah, I agree, Ed. I just can't understand because the rest of the top of the vehicle is blacked out.
Yeah.
So if they were trying to do something to like we discussed earlier with the white paint, reduce temperatures or something, then you wouldn't black out the roof and the pillars,
and the blacks to reduce glare from the sun. So one good thing about this, did you see this in here, this picture where this one getting air? That's a great photo, isn't it?
That is, yes.
So yeah, listeners, go out to, of course, we'll link in the show notes. This is the story. This one is the 2023 Land Rover Defender Trophy story. And the second photo down, good photo. You can see the skid plating that's on the bottom there. This one has the winch and the tires are spinning. That's a cool photo right there. That's one to put on the wall.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually an interesting comparison to the Trek event. Because these are relatively stock vehicles from Land Rover, their off-roading package and, winch package and all of that. Whereas the Trek vehicles are all outfitted by
Lucky 8.
Yes, Lucky 8. Thank you.
Shout out to Justin and Lucky 8 team there. Yes.
Yeah, so they've got, lift kits, larger tires, actual bull bar sort of setups and
extra skid plating too, I think.
Yeah. So they're fully kitted out.
And next, Range Rover Evoque 2023 review, but this is the PHEV, and this is from Australia. The Evoque HSE P300E. It's a plug-in hybrid, notably only available in the top trim level, with top shelf performance too. It is the right car to represent Range Rover's entry-level model at a critical time in technological transformation? ? Let's take a look. So they have a long article, read just a bit of it. While we're on the topic of excess, the Evoque HSE P300E certainly reflects it in the price. The plug-in starts from a whopping $105,000 Australian, putting it in the same league as luxury PHEV rivals a full size up. Because there are no small luxury segment, small SUVs, that's the sentence, because there are no small luxury segment, small SUVs in the league currently, they're forced to compare the Evoque to cars like the Volvo XC60 Recharge, that's $100,000 Australian. The BMW X3 xDrive is $107,000 Australian. And a particularly good value, the Lexus NX 450H, and that's $88,000 Australian. As I said, they go on to talk about the interior, the exterior, the ride, the engine, and I think the storage. And in the drivetrain section, I wanted to read this. The Evoque now sports JLR's hybridized Ingenium engine family across the range, and the setup which appears in the plug-in hybrid model might be the most interesting. It consists of a 1.5-liter 3-cylinder combustion engine, which is said to produce 147 kilowatts. That is kW's kilowatts, right?
Yes.
And the electric motor powering the rear axle, producing 80 kilowatts, and two of which combine for an impressive quoted total output of 227 kilowatts, driving all four wheels. So there's an electric motor in the rear, and it looks like there's a combustion engine in the front, based on when I'm reading that. The motor sources its power from 15 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack under the floor, which provides a claimed 62 kilometer of fully electric driving range. Land Rover also replaced the mechanical brake pedal with a drive-by-wire one to allow for improved blended regenerative braking. And they go on to talk about ownership and safety. And so if that's driving it, if it's something that interests you, you may want to go ahead and check that article, and we will finish up with the verdict. The Range Rover Evoque is more highly specified and more luxurious than ever, and this plug-in hybrid version makes the most of what's on offer with its slick but familiar feel from behind the wheel. Unfortunately, it does have an eye-watering price tag to go with a classy design, and the options list is a bit rude. Sounds like very Australian. All things considered, but the core offering is a solid luxury buy for city slickers nonetheless. What makes the Evoque P300E stand out for me is its impressive EV driving range, excellent charging specs, which make it convenient as possible to make the most of its electrified features. It's up to the buyer whether these conveniences and the Range Rover badge are worth swapping into a car a full size down from its luxury plug-in rivals for the same money.
One of the things that is really interesting to me is I probably just haven't been paying attention to the Evoque enough, and that is that they're using the 3-cylinder.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, it's funny. There's been quite a resurgence of the 3-cylinder engine in the last couple of years, basically because at this point we can push the performance out of them. But yeah, the PHEV in the Evoque actually makes a lot of sense because it is even smaller vehicle, so lighter, probably more aerodynamic than the larger Range Rovers. So you get a pretty good electric only range out of it.
And probably more prone to around the town driving than its larger brethren. And also you're probably in country, not America, not Australia, where smaller vehicles might be more prevalent.
Right.
The 2023 Range Rover Sport passes the plug-in vibe check. 2023 Range Rover Sport. So like the Range Rover, the design of the Range Rover Sport follows a less is more philosophy. The exterior looks like it was hewn from a single solid, while the interior continues the clean, crisp look we've come to expect from Land Rover. The Sport nails it with retractable door handles, thin bands of LED headlights, as few cut lines as possible, and a slight wedge as it heels that gets capped by tall, thin LED lights. With no more third-row seat on its option list, the 2023 Range Rover Sport makes the most of its 194.7 inches overall length. That's 4.2 inches less than the full-size Range Rover. 118-inch wheelbase. That's identical wheelbase to the full-size Range Rover. The front seats have at a minimum 20 ways of adjustment and real leather upholstery to go with the almost 3.5 feet of legroom. Repeat that. Front seats have almost 3.5 feet of legroom. I found that a fascinating stat. The Range Rover Sport P530 First Edition, available in the 2023 model year only, comes equipped with a 4.4-liter twin turbocharged V8, good for 523 horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque, or enough for 0 to 60 in acceleration 4.3 seconds. It's delightful as usual, with a roarty soundtrack and muscular appeal, and it carries a tow rating of up to 7,716 pounds. Regardless of the grade, the Sport comes with air suspension, adaptive dampers, and terrain response controls. Even enables a luxurious experience on remote trails. New on this generation of Range Rover Sport is adaptive cruise control for off-roading. I'd like to repeat that. Adaptive cruise control for off-roading. And I have to ask, as I pause the podcast and reading this, why? If you're going off-roading, do you really like adaptive cruise control for off-roading? Really? I'm sorry, that makes no sense to me. None. Maybe if you're in the military or you had some other application, if I'm going off-roading, aren't you trying to challenge yourself in your vehicle to make sure you can do certain things? I don't get adaptive cruise control. I don't get cruise control off-road. I don't get adaptive cruise control. Okay. I'll end my rant.
Yeah. It's for your whole convoy of Range Rover Sports, off-roading. You use the adaptive cruise control, and then none of you have to know how to have even throttle control over bumpy terrain.
Okay. The driver has 4 settings to choose from, each of which maintains a suitable speed while off-roading and enables the driver to fully focus on steering. That's what the article says. I want to control. Okay, I know. Let it go, John. Let it go. Moving on. And this is the end. At the top end, the $122,850 US P530 gets almost all these touches, as well as a swell V8. It's a 1-year act only, to be followed up with an all-electric Range Rover Sport. When it gets that battery implant, the powertrain will match its already alluring vibe. Aside from the adaptive off-road cruise control, which, of course, what respecting Range Rover Sport owner is going to go off-road? Let's let that go. But yet you have the option. Doesn't matter. Let's move on from it, John. Let it go. This is the last time they're putting a V8 in this thing. So if you want your Sport to have an internal combustion engine in America, you got to get it now.
Yeah. And what did you say? It was 4 point what? How many seconds?
4.3 acceleration.
4.3. Yeah. I mean,
maybe that's why you need off-road cruise control, so that you don't bang into the vehicle in front of you because it gets, no. Okay. Let it go, John.
Yeah. Well, probably.
2023 Range Rover. This is the SUV of the year from Motor Trend. They have a full review of it that came out, and for Motor Trend, you can read that if you are in the market. You may want to read it. I'm just going to read you the pros and cons. Pro, looks expensive. Pro, smells expensive. There's a whole thing about smells. Pro, performs as a Range Rover should. Cons, it is expensive. Cons, closely resembles the old one. Cons, base engine not nearly as nice as the optional one.
Those cons sound quite normal.
They do.
Usually someone wants the vehicle to resemble the old one. And usually the base engine is not nearly as nice as the optional one. And for a Range Rover, they're usually expensive.
All that explains Range Rover right there. It's expensive. It looks like the old one. And if you want the better engine, you're going to have to pay even more money. And then I've liked these various things. We've seen them before from Carlisle, Matt Watson. He did a comparison, and I enjoyed this one, between the new Range Rover V8 and the Bentley Bentayga. And they did, they call it the off-road battle. I think it's about 16 minutes. It's interesting. I mean, they're not doing anything super challenging, certainly. They're not going through any mud or rock crawling, but just, there's some, a little bit of off camber. There's a couple hill climbs. There's a kind of a neat one going downhill and going in low range. So you might want to check that out. I thought that was cool to see. I like that one. And then for you Defender owners, Land Rover Defender, the new one, can now be equipped with ballistic and blast protection. Land Rover Defender buyers who are after upgraded protection for their four-wheel drive vehicle now have the option thanks to new lightweight solution. A new agreement between JLR and vehicle protection specialist Trasco has resulted in an upgraded version of the Defender being made available. The 110 specification car can now be fitted with a lightweight anti-kidnap, or AKIP conversion kit. But thanks to an inconspicuous design, it's barely noticeable against the standard car. Lightweight security-grade steel, glass, and composite materials are incorporated throughout the Defender, bringing added protection to driver and passengers. Various levels of ballistic protection, certified by the VPAM standard for armored cars, featured in all areas such as windscreen, door glass, and footwells. There's also a new ballistic rear partition. And there's more, just a little bit more you can read about it. And they have a couple pictures, which we assume to be the Defender protection vehicle, and it looks no different than normal protection. But did you notice, Morgan, no indication of price?
I did notice that. I assume that this is for people who really need that sort of protection. Don't have to worry about price.
Yeah, I think if you need that protection, you're not worried about the cost of the vehicle, let alone the upgraded protection. Exactly.
And I have a feeling that some of their target market is Bond villains.
So does Jalopnik think that Ratcliffe will buy one then? Is that it? As a little callback. And next, this custom Land Rover Defender is inspired by the iconic Chinook helicopter. It is cool looking. When I first saw the picture, there's a couple of pictures. It looks like a Series 3 to me, but you then look closer and you're like, oh, it's actually is a Defender, but it looks kind of like a Series 3.
Yeah, it's tasteful.
British customizing firm Technic built the specially commissioned Q40. It's a 2013 Defender 110 in honor of one of the Royal Air Force's longest serving aircraft. Though anyone who's ever seen a Vietnam War movie will recognize the Boeing-made Chinook CH-47's distinct twin rotor design. This is a graphic representation of which was depicted through the swirling grid painted over the Defender's rear, which is actually it looks like a cab version, but with the flat sides. That's more like a commercial version, I guess. And that's where they put the double swirls that kind of look like two blades intersecting. That's pretty cool. The Technic also equipped a handful of mechanical upgrades with a new ride-improving chassis that borrows from the company's classic racing department, programmable dampers, upgraded push bars, 6-piston brakes, a 2.3-liter turbo 4-cylinder from a Ford Mustang that sends 307 horsepower through a bolstered 6-speed transmission. Oh, geez. The buyer of this paid just over $154,000 US, but they paid it in British pounds, but it was equivalent to $154,000. Apparently a one-off. Cool looking.
Yeah.
And actually, just in time for Christmas, if you want to get your kid a Land Rover, you have the option now of getting them into Land Rovers with a junior car Land Rover. Your kid is asking for something big for this Christmas, so don't disappoint them. Half-scale Series 2A would be perfect, and it costs just a hair more than a 2022 Nissan Versa. The boxy old-school aesthetic are spot on, and it gets even a modern 1.2 kilowatt 48-volt electric powertrain that launches it to 25 miles per hour. Features like ventilated disc brakes, dual mirrors, round headlights. That's a feature? I guess it is. Painted wheels, They actually do look pretty good, although they're the wrong color. A 500-pound payload capacity makes it truly desirable, and you can even add leather seats, special paint, and a full-size tire. I think they did a nice job.
Yeah, definitely. They do note, for those less skilled in the art of driving, a speed limiter can be added to keep keep things to a tepid 5 miles per hour.
Yay.
Which, they did not list what the 0 to 60 is for this, but yeah, it looks fun.
I suspect that it would accelerate 0 to 60 faster than a comparable 2A.
Oh, easily.
I think so. Yes. I think this one would go. Yes. And in fact, it might even beat my Defender, I suspect.
Yeah. Now we'll have to see. Well, you obviously can't do a 0 to 60 with the 5 mile per hour limiter, but my guess is that, it can get to the 5 miles per hour much faster as well.
Maybe we do 0 to 25 since it does have or maybe 0 to 20. The cost is $17,000.
Yeah, and there are some other brands out there. I'm familiar with Toylander as well. Some of those you can buy as kits, if you don't want the fully assembled one and you want to play with the drivetrain yourself. But yeah, it looks fun.
And as always, if you purchase any sort of Land Rover and you wish for it to be tested in any capacity, we do provide that service here at the podcast, whether in Vermont or in Pennsylvania. We'll be happy to test out your brand new electric, toy, full-size Land Rover. It's a service we provide free. We'll be happily drive it around for free.
The perks of being a listener.
And finally, Land Rover Defender stunt vehicles from No Time to Die sell for big bucks at auction. The movie star Defenders recently sold for a combined total of £352,000, which is about $383,000, at Christie's 60 Years of James Bond auction. 2 vehicles were sold at the auction, one of them being an actual stunt car from the movie. The specially modified Defender 110 is one of 10 vehicles used during filming and sport a unique 007 VIN. It was snapped up for £189,000, about $206,000, which is nearly twice the price of a brand new Range Rover. Thankfully, all for a good cause. The money raised will go towards the British Red Cross. Another Defender was also put up for sale, a 110 V8 created by SV Bespoke. Inspired by the movie itself, just 300 examples of the Bond edition were made for global consumption, but this particular model boasts a 60 Years of Bond logo on the exterior trim. This rare iteration of the 110 sold for £163,000, about $178,000, and the funds will go toward Tusk, a charity that protects endangered species across Africa. So, and of course, they have all sorts of cool photos of the Defender when it was being filmed for the movie. And I remind you, they filmed all these before the Defender was officially released.
Yeah.
My recollection is the release was supposed to be timed with the movie coming out. And then I think the pandemic happened and
yeah, and the movie got delayed. So I think the actual, production vehicles came to market before the movie came out, but the movie contains vehicles that were pre-production.
Right, that's right. They were pre-production cars, right? And then by then they had made what? I think by the time the movie came out, they were about 6-8 months into production.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So again, if you have one of those, we're happy to test that. But that's the news for October 2022. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers help protect your classic Land Rover. Whether you're on the trail or cruising around town, they're the perfect solution for protecting your pristine Land Rover seats or to cover up your well-worn and aged seats. Each seat cover is hand-cut and sewn in the USA for a custom fit that looks like it's straight from the factory. Every seat cover is crafted using durable 600 denier Cordura material. It's waterproof, oil, and dust resistant. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are designed to be extremely comfortable and help keep you warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer while providing protection against mud, dirt, grime, and more. And I can attest to this, especially keeping you cooler in the summer, because before I had the seats on, I swear my heated seats were turned on even in the summer. And no, it's just the seats used to retain so much heat, but the covers reflecting some of the heat. Knightsbridge Overland seat covers are available for most classic Land Rovers, including Series, Defender, Discovery, and Range Rover. Select the Knightsbridge Overland seat cover that's right for your Rover. Available in both tactical and non-tactical versions in 4 colors, black, tan, mocha, and gray. I suggest the mocha. That's what's in my 110. Our tactical seat covers include military-grade MOLLE webbing that accommodates pouches, weapons, tools, first aid kits, and more. Non-tactical seat cover feature 3 handy pockets for much-needed extra storage in your Land Rover. Visit knightsbridgeoverland.com and enter STEER10 at checkout for 10% off your Knightsbridge Overland seat cover order. That's knightsbridgeoverland.com. Enter STEER10 for 10% off your order. Protect and enhance your Land Rover seats with Knightsbridge Overland. So it was back in 2016, the last time we talked to Jan and Alec Forman, who had made an epic overland journey back in 1977, which is when Star Wars came out, by the way. Just don't want to throw that out. I was 10 years old at the time. Kind of an important year in my life. But we talked to Jan and Alec back in 2016. They're making their triumphant return to the podcast to give us an update on what they've been up to, and because they're looking to restore and reimagine their historic Land Rover, their Series 3. And so joining us from the UK, not sure where, you'll tell us. Charles, Alec, and Jan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to be here again.
Yeah,
great to catch up with you guys again.
Absolutely. Welcome back. So where are you guys at right now?
So we're all located in Nottingham at the moment. We're sitting in my parents' new house. We've all relocated here in the UK.
Yeah, the last time I think we talked, you were here in the US, right?
That's right, when we're in Virginia. But now we're back here all together in the same spot.
You moved back to the UK, and what's the state of the Series 3, the Land Rover?
The Series 3, the same one that my parents used on their trip in 1977, currently sits in a barn in France, awaiting its sort of return to what we like to say reimagined journey, in which it can sort of get back on the road and continue to inspire people with my parents' story. In 2018 is when we decided that it would be a good idea to do a restoration of it, since they still had it parked in their back garden in Germany at the time. I was still living in the US at that point, so one step we thought would be helpful would be for my dad to start just dismantling it piece by piece. Gave a good activity for him to do, and we thought that might help speed up the process. But then, as we all experienced, the world turned upside down with the pandemic, so that put a pause on everything. During that time and soon after, we all made a move back to the UK. And now here we are, 2022, and revitalizing the idea of restoring their Land Rover back to what it looked like on the trip.
So I take it you want to take it out on new adventures and new journeys? Is that the goal?
Yeah, I have 3 sisters, and we all have a vested interest in continuing to travel. So I thought, it'd be great if it was restored and we could take it on adventures to places it hasn't been. Probably not as a rigorous trip as it was back then, but it also would be great to be able to take to some of these Land Rover shows we've been attending and just have that great sort of connection between the book they wrote and the Land Rover sitting right there.
It is a storied truck, and I'm glad you're considering and working towards keeping it on the road and having it continue its journeys. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of all the Land Rovers who have their stories, but it's one that's obviously important to our family and has remained in the family for 45 years. So it would seem wasteful to not at least try and bring it back to life, I think.
Well, why don't you remind our listeners about that 1977 journey a little bit? Maybe you can give us a reminder of what happened for those not familiar with your story, like Strangers with Angels.
Our book is called Strangers Like Angels with a Devil or Two to Boot. And that is celebrating the fact that many people you meet when you travel around the world are very welcoming, but not all. The background for the title. Yes, we went 40,000 miles through 29 countries in Europe, Africa, and Asia. We crossed the Sahara Desert twice. We crossed Afghanistan before the Russians entered. And we went to the highest point of the highest road in the world in Ladakh, in northern India, 18,380 feet.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head just because I've heard the story before, but I'm shaking my head again. You could reminding of just what you guys did. That's just still stunning and amazing and fantastic.
And we only had maps and a compass. We didn't have any other.
Yeah, there's no GPS, no cell phones.
No phones. We communicated with our families by letter. So they had to wait several weeks for letters to arrive. Everything was like recording. I mean, these days everybody records on Facebook or whatever. and keeps a blog going, but we just wrote in our diary. And from the diary and letters that we sent, I wrote the book from
your diaries and all the stories you had. Yeah. And yeah, wow. I shake my head. Anytime people travel that far and how old were you at the time? May I ask that? You can just give us decades. It's fine. You were in your 20s or 30s?
25 and I was 30. Yes.
You see all these young people doing those things.
Well, what's interesting is people are doing it now, right? And it's become more popular, and especially with the pandemic as well. Everybody seemed to be doing van life then. And I always enjoy the comparison of my parents just did it because they wanted to go and see what was on the other side of the hill, whereas now people can be inspired by each other's Instagram feeds and YouTube videos that they'll say, hey, I want to do that too. And I guess Mom and Dad's book was just kind of a delayed source of inspiration that kind of came 40 years later and can still be a source of inspiration for people today. And it is fun to make that comparison of a time before hashtags and GPS, really, when travel was possibly a little bit simpler back then.
You asked about how old we were. The Land Rover itself was 2 years old when we did the trip. And when we bought it from my uncle, we used it to carry around pigs and potatoes. So the first challenge was to get rid of the agricultural smell from it. A couple of days cleaning it up, and then set about the task of making it into a motor home, our home for the time we were on the road.
Which was 14 months. We lived and drove in the Land Rover.
And just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
And you didn't travel with any other trucks? It was just the two of you and your Series 3?
Yeah, we set off like that. We did have a little time, a day or so in the Sahara when we first entered the Sahara Desert. We linked up with a couple in a van from New Zealand. But once we got confident with the journey, we sort of did our separate thing. But also in Afghanistan, you were not allowed to cross the central route from Herat to Kabul. You could not go alone. You had to go in convoy, but that was convoy with other travelers. So we teamed up with a Swiss couple and made our way across. But interestingly, during lockdown, for something to do, because we had actually tracked down this Swiss couple, like where their address was in Switzerland, and we were living just across the border in Germany. So during lockdown, I sent them a card with photos of our journey of us together with our Land Rovers, and sort of said, well, we're just living over here in Germany. What about, just said, hello, how are you doing? And they were so excited that we had connected with them after 40 years or whatever. And so they made the trip to come to us, and we sat under our carport, and I set the table out because it was, the pandemic, we had to be socially distanced. And we each had our own food to eat that I had prepared. And we spent 6 hours talking about our journey. And they had brought the photos that they had taken, and we looked at each other's photos. So for the first time in 40 years, we saw pictures of our Land Rover we'd never seen before.
That had to be amazing. That would be. So you're, as part of your Kickstarter, you're planning a picture book. Will some of those photos be in the picture book?
Yeah, they've given us permission to make use of them as we wish.
Oh, nice. So they had fond memories, I assume.
Yes, and because at that time when we parted we were together across Afghanistan, Pakistan we did separately. And then we went up to the highest point of the highest road in the world together, and then into Nepal to Kathmandu. And it was Christmas time, and they were going to do some hiking in the mountains. But we were then ready to make our way back, to go back west to England. So, of course, there was no exchange of anything. You couldn't exchange, they had no address. There was no way of contact. So we just said, hi, it was nice traveling with you. That's all we did. So when we met again, it was just so interesting, the things that they remembered about our journey together. And it was, and we've kept in touch since that time, of course.
think to just add to the way you found them was through a Swiss
that's
Land
right.
Rover club, right?
That's right. Yeah, we were going to a meet of Land Rovers in Switzerland near Neuchâtel, which we knew was near where they lived, and we asked one of the guys there, "Is there any chance that you might be able to locate the people who had this Land Rover?" In actual fact, they sold it soon after the trip, but he was still able to locate, and they were fortunately living in the same address as what they had when they originally bought the Land Rover. It was, it was very straightforward.
They didn't hold on to their truck unlike you guys, huh?
No. And it was sort of in the past, and they hadn't really looked at their pictures for years. And so with having us make this contact, they got them out and they were scanning all their slides. It just was remarkable, really, because, as I say, they got on with their life doing other things and hadn't really thought about the journey anymore. So it brought it all to life again for them.
Dad, you'd want to share what happened to the Land Rover after the trip? What did we do with it?
Well, we basically, 2-year period anyway, went to Bible school.
No, from when we were in Plymouth, dear. We had it as a family vehicle, didn't we? For 5 years.
Oh, yeah, okay.
7 years. 7 years.
7 years. We were in Plymouth. I was chief engineer of a local airline. We had our Land Rover in the back of the hangar. Owner of the airline was very happy for me to do that. And we actually took out the 6-cylinder gasoline engine, which we'd used on the trip, which was pretty thirsty on fuel, but installed a Perkins 4203 diesel, 4-cylinder diesel engine, which is very old technology, good old plodding engine. But it eventually met the emissions inspector, and that was the end of that. And so from then, it kind of been in storage.
Right. Well, when you were traveling, was it easy to find gasoline, or was diesel easier to find?
And we didn't really have any problem because it was gasoline. There was always had both available. One time it was quite interesting for fuel. The refineries in Nigeria at Port Harcourt, apparently once a year, they close the gates for a month. They don't tell anybody when they're going to do it particularly. So the whole country winds down and runs out of gas. And we got pretty close on a few occasions, to running out of fuel.
How about finding parts and repairs? Because I mean, you're an engineer mechanic, as I recall. And did you have any difficulty finding parts and fixing it?
We had a few minor problems to sort out, but the two major ones. The first one was when we were we'd crossed the Sahara for the first time. We were driving through Nigeria, and it was during this time of difficult to get fuel. As we were driving along, there's a British company, Wimpy Construction Company, were building the new road alongside. That's what they do. They don't repair the old road. They just build a new one alongside. We were sitting in the Land Rover having a cup of tea, and this local Land Rover belonging to the construction company went racing past us, and then we followed the direction he'd gone. After a couple of miles, he was there wrapped around a rock. They'd not gone round the corner, and there was 3 guys staggering about with not serious injury, but cuts from glass. And they were saying, "Wimpy camp, Wimpy camp." And they had a road construction camp. We drove.
I just say you missed out the bit while we were having a cup of tea.
We'd been driving along, and there was a loud bang from the rear end of the Land Rover, and we discovered that the main overload spring, the bottom leaf, had actually broken. And we were having the cup of tea to figure out what we were going to do. Anyway, we followed on and found these guys and went to the Wimpy construction camp. Jan took them off to the medical centre, and I stayed with the vehicle and was underneath seeing if any of the leaves had moved as one had broken. And the manager came along. He said, what's up? And I said, well, we just brought in 3 of your guys from a road accident. He didn't ask how they were. He asked us, what was the Land Rover like? We didn't look too good. And he said, that's the 3rd one that's been written. Brand new ones have been written off in a month. Well, our Land Rover, he said, what's the problem? I said, well, we've got a broken spring. He said, oh, that's not a problem. Bring it round to the garage. My guys will put new suspension on for you overnight, which they did. 2 new shock absorbers, 2 sets of leaf springs. He said, take any of the old parts with you want. and fill up at the gas point before you leave. He said, said it's film night, so we had a movie night, an air-conditioned bungalow to stay in. So they looked after us very well. And we went on our merry way.
That's great. That sounds like Rover ownership. No matter where you go, there's people there to help out.
Another adventure that we had was in Baluchistan. We were traveling around, going around Afghanistan. And in Baluchistan, we were up in the mountains, parked overnight on our own. In the morning, I kind of did the usual daily checks on it and started the engine up, and there's water spraying out at great velocity out from the top of the water pump. So it was I could see what had happened. There was a seal had gone. Normally on an engine, you have a pipe which runs from the engine cylinder head to the block called, bypass hose. Well, this was a bypass O-ring. I got out my trusty kit of spares, which we bought especially for the trip, which had in it every single O-ring, seal, gasket you could wish for on the engine, except that one. We resolved the problem by using a seal out of our water purifying setup, which was the same inner and outer diameter, but too thick. So I spent time shaving it down with a hacksaw and emery paper and put the thing in, and it got us all the way back to England.
Wow. You had the skill. You had the skill to do that. I don't think I certainly wouldn't. So let's get back to the Kickstarter and what's that all about. The truck's now, I guess you're trying to get it back to the UK, and you want to reimagine the truck, and maybe tell us a little more. The Kickstarter's about to kick off.
Yeah, that's right. November 19th is when we're hoping to launch the Kickstarter project. We'd definitely invite people to come and check out Explmore.com, where you'll be able to find links to it. But that's spelled EXPLMORE.com. Yeah, the intent with the Kickstarter project is to celebrate my parents' story further and the Land Rover itself. So it's kind of a combination of raising the funds that we might need for doing the restoration to reimagine it back to the way it looked back on that trip. Me as a designer by profession, also taking the opportunity with Kickstarter. It's a platform in which creatives can bring some creative projects to the Kickstarter community. As part of that, we're going to do a coffee table book filled with all the photos, some additional writings that weren't in the original book. And then I've been collaborating with a number of illustrators to kind of bring some other creative view into aspects of their story. So on the Kickstarter, as part of being a backer, you'll get the opportunity to get rewards depending on what tier you back us with. But some of those rewards include a tea-towel set that have some beautifully illustrated pieces that celebrate some key moments in their journey. One being crossing the Sahara twice, the other one being them making it to the top of the world, 18,000 feet. And the other one, of course, sort of highlighting the fact that they drove across Afghanistan sort of in 1977, the year before everything changed.
Those are cool looking travelogue posters.
Yeah, they kind of take on an old, the train, there's often train posters that you find, old classic train posters. That's kind of the inspiration behind them.
Can I have to ask, as an American, I've never understood what a tea towel is or what its purpose is.
You don't wash dishes in the States?
Oh, yeah. So, we would just call that a towel or a kitchen towel.
Well, that's what it is.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But you can use it too, like a poster, like a cloth poster.
Okay. All right. So it goes along the lines where you would call dinner or supper tea. So like tea time means dinner time. So where we would call it a kitchen towel, since it's dinner time and you use it to clean up your dinner plates, you can call it a tea towel.
I think also originally it was used to keep the kettle warm.
Oh, okay. Right. Sorry to do that to you, but I hear about tea towels. And I'm like, I knew it took me a while to figure out that tea time was not drinking tea, but it meant dinner or supper, depending on however you call it. And I finally figured that one out after a while, but tea towels.
So the tea towels can be enjoyed on the wall, or you can have them in your home, or you can have them in your van or your Land Rover.
Take them on journeys. Yeah, I don't think you'd want to use them to clean up your dishes. They're too nice. Those are pretty cool. Those are pretty cool. Yeah. What other rewards are available for as part of the Kickstarter?
The actual book, Strangers Like Angels.
We'll also include a signed copy of my parents' original book, Strangers Like Angels, with a 002 to boot. But in addition to that, there's also you can get a lapel pin that is a replica of their Series 3. We also have quite a fun one where people can kind of feel a part of the reimagining of the Land Rover, where we will somehow get their name attached onto the chassis, whether that's painting or something. We're still yet to determine that, but we want people to kind of feel a part of this new chapter of its life. So as a reward of backing our project, one of the tiers includes, or several of the tiers include the opportunity to have your name on the chassis at some point. Over the course of the time, it will come off or something, but we'll figure those details out later. But I think ceremonially, it'll be nice to know that people backed our project and backed the story and will be a part of the Land Rover moving forward.
And then when you and your sisters take it out on journeys again, right? Then we can go with you.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, the intent once it's all been restored is to be able to utilize it further as a family and take it to places it hasn't been before. I think that would be quite interesting. And then it also would be great to take it to local Land Rover shows here and add to the inspiration behind the story.
It's a story truck. It needs to be seen. You need to get it out there. I mean, it's done cool stuff.
Exactly. And you know, the fact that we still have it in the family 45 years later, I think at one point it almost got sold, which I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yes, me too. I'm glad it didn't happen either. That's good. Yes, you gotta keep that on the road. I mean, it's a story truck. It's in many ways, it was well known as Oxford is known for first overland. Not only do you say you cross the Sahara, but you get to say you cross the Sahara twice. That's just...
Yeah, I mean, I think in contrast to the first overland, it was just my parents just went out to have an adventure, and that can be made in comparison to today's explorers. People are wanting to go and see the world, and that was the same back then as it is today. It's got its differences, and obviously technology makes things easier and maybe harder in other ways.
Jan, you guys didn't have any sponsorship back then, right? Support. You just guys went out on your own.
No, we saved for 5 years while we were in the army, while Alec was down in the Antarctic, and doing different various jobs. We saved for 5 years before we bought the Land Rover and set off. Yeah, you literally did all on your own. Whereas the first overland, not taking nothing away from them and taking nothing away from you, but they had support. They got sponsorship.
I mean, it is fascinating today that travelers are able to continue it with YouTube. Once you get to a certain level and get a good following, people like Lee and Steph of Grizzly and Bear, they're able to continue doing this longer than what maybe you would have been able to do without social media and things like that. It enables people to continue. Otherwise, you'd probably have to get a job somewhere along the way in order to add to the fuel fund to keep going.
Do you have any places that it hasn't been to in mind that you want to take it to in North America?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It would be cool to return to the Overland Expo or something like that and bring it.
In North America, we're planning a Jubilee Land Rover 75th Jubilee event, North America clubs, and it's a date's already planned. Some of our listeners already know about this, but that's the middle of June in New York State. Something to think about. I mean, depending on how long it takes you to get your truck back, but I throw that out at you.
What year?
Next year, 2023.
2023.
That's Land Rover's 75th anniversary.
But on the website, Explmore, there's a lot more background of our vehicle and of the work that Alec did to take it apart and so on. Yeah, there's a lot of pictures and everything on there.
Try to document it as much as possible, and hopefully as it gets restored we can document it further to kind of help share that restoration story as well.
And did you say that you are looking to hire out the restoration itself?
Yeah, I think practically, I'm not one to do a restoration, and I think we'd like to get it done sooner rather than later so that we can just start utilizing it. Dad's possibly not at an age in which it's possible to keep doing that, and so we just want to speed up the process, and we found a local shop here in Nottingham that we've been talking to and seeing what can be possible. So I think that'll add to the story as well. It's just about making connections with people.
What is your goal? Looks like it's 25,000 pounds. If you reach that 25,000 pound goal, what would that achieve?
So yeah, it's kind of again with Kickstarter, it's it's a balance of being a creative project. So we've got the new book that we're hoping to release as part of that, but then 50% of that goal will go towards the restoration of the Land Rover. And the nice thing about Kickstarter in some ways is it's all or nothing. So if we reach that goal, then all is great. But if we go over the goal, that's just additional funds that we can put towards the various phases of the restoration, I guess, and also other opportunities to celebrate it. Maybe we'll do like a reveal show or something like that. Would be quite fun with backers, and invite people to come and camp and see it in person.
If you don't reach your goal, nobody.
That's right. Yeah. So the flip side to that is with Kickstarter, if you don't reach the goal by the end of the period, then you don't get the fund back to the backers, which is good because you don't want to back something that's not going to actually be full.
Yeah, not be fully funded.
Exactly.
Right. Charles is leading this. It's we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, there's several people that we've looked up on the internet. There must be several hundred people back them, but then they produce the excellent kind of BBC quality documentaries on their travel for the previous period. So they're earning what they're getting in sponsorship.
He's referring to the YouTube travelers.
You also plan then to have your adventures, then further adventures would show up on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, it's all about, basically like the reason why I started Explmore was the platform in which to tell my parents' story, help them sell the book, but also it's developed into a platform in which can inspire and curate like today's travelers, sharing their stories, using my parents' story as kind of a resource for like, even in the back of the book, there's a list of all the items they took on their trip. So it's a place in which people can come as a community. I sell primarily like a decal that people put on their vehicle, just simply the Explmore logo. And I've sent that to thousands of places around the world. And like, it's amazing to see something I've designed on my computer on a Land Rover in the middle of Tehran is one of the examples, or out in Japan, or
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Australia. Yeah, or Pennsylvania.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, just checking. It's a little exotic here. It can be exotic.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to see that, and people. It's one that makes people think, what does that mean? And if they look it up, they'll see it's just celebrating that need to go and explore more of the world and engage with people, and then embrace global cultures, which on a personal level I feel like is extremely helpful in better understanding each other. Unless you go and travel and see it for yourself, you're not going to fully understand what it's all about.
And you've even joined the podcast ranks.
That's right. Yeah. I recently have started my own podcast called Today's Explorers, which you can find on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all the other platforms. But that is, interviewing today's travelers. And basically the way I've done it is provide an opportunity for them to just share their story. I ask them what inspires them to explore, perhaps what differences they can make between traveling back when my parents did it and today. It's fun to make those comparisons and to hear their perspectives, basically. And the common theme is traveling enables people to better understand each other.
What is good with the Kickstarter is the video that you've prepared, Charles.
Yeah, if anything, go to the Kickstarter when it's up on November 19th and just watch the video, because it uses video footage that my parents took on the trip as well. Small snippets.
Yeah, color slides and snippets of video that we took on that journey.
So is the Kickstarter video, is that the first time that this, original, I guess it would be film footage, right? that has been seen the rest of the world?
Yeah.
I would say majority of it. There may be a couple of clips pulled before for social media, but even me looking back at it, I was like, I don't remember seeing this before, so that's been refreshing to kind of see something.
And it combines the color slides as well as the video, so it all is interwoven together.
I don't recall you taking video. When did I forget that? Did you take video on the trip?
Well, we did, but Charles says, "Why didn't you take more?" And well, we had what was the
this
camera?
Was on film, not on.
Yeah, what was our camera we had?
Olympus Trip 35.
No, for the video.
8mm?
8mm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but the reason we didn't take a lot of video, and in fact we actually sold the camera on the journey, was because if you're taking pictures, and we were very interested in the people, you're standing there with this camera in front of your face, taking the videos, and it seemed too intrusive. So we were very we didn't take very much, but what we did take is on this little the information of our journey.
The camera which we took the slides on was not intrusive. It was one of the first good quality, just point and shoot. You could just whip it up, click, and that's it. You've got the picture. You don't have to stand there and just adjusting all your 3-foot long lenses, and it's taken on a simple camera.
Isn't that another way the world has changed? When you were traveling, if you pulled out a camera, people would worry whether their soul was getting taken or it was intrusive. Now people have their phones or their whatever it is, and they're just taking pictures and videos all the time, and no one bats an eye anymore.
There's many situations which were really precious. If we'd have got the camera out, it would have totally broken I remember sitting in the desert in Algeria, I think it was, with a Bedouin for a nomadic sheep herding family. And that was just fantastic. It was beautiful.
We didn't get the camera out.
No, we didn't get the camera out. We got some lovely shots, but we just thought it would spoil the hospitality that these people were showing us.
Well, I think that's if you were to give any recommendation to those traveling today, Mum, you've said this before, to switch off technology and to allow for sort of that spontaneous moment to happen, whether that's GPS or something safety-wise, but like turn it off and see just what happens. You might go down a trail that you didn't know was there, or even ask someone. They might bring you in and you'd have an experience that you would not have known about.
That's right.
Jan, Alec, thank you very much for coming back on the program. I'm going to thank you in a second, Charles, but I got to thank them special because they crossed the Sahara twice. That's kick ass. Yes, I swore a little bit, but that's kick ass, and I'm glad you guys were back, and I'm very excited that you're keeping the truck going and you're going to get back on the road. So that's very cool. Charles, thanks for what you've done to keep your parents' trip alive, so people remember it, know about it, and you're also building this community of people that are overlanders, and whether I guess it's not specific to Land Rovers, but still. You're keeping that community going of overlanders, which is fantastic. Remind our listeners where they can find your Kickstarter and when it launches, and all things Explmore.
The Kickstarter project to reimagine my parents' Land Rover will launch on November 19th. And around that time, you'll be able to go to explmore.com, which is explmore.com, and that'll forward you on to the Kickstarter page. Where you'll be able to hopefully back us and see more information about the project. Interestingly enough, as well, on the 19th, that's the day before, we are all going to go and enjoy the Great British Land Rover show, where we'll also use that as an opportunity to kick off our Kickstarter project.
Excellent. Tell us a little more about the Great British Land Rover show.
Great British.
I want to say Great British Bake Off, and I know.
The Great British Land Rover show is at Stoneleigh Park on the 20th of November. It's a Sunday, and it's unusually an indoor show, although I think there are outdoor activities with the vehicles, but indoors for displaying Land Rovers and various, like ourselves, displaying our book and Explmore. And it's just a great opportunity to be able to interact with people who are interested in Land Rovers.
That's cool. So I will have, of course, links in the show notes to Explmore, and that will take you to the Kickstarter for getting the Series 3 back on the road, which is it's a very storied truck, and it's important that we keep that truck back on the road and starting new adventures. I think it's a laudable activity and a laudable goal.
As part of our publications for our book, we have it in a printed form. Strangers Like Angels with the Devil or Two to Boot is in a printed form, but we also, Alec and I, recorded an audio book, and that's actually available for free. And the link goes through Explmore website. And it's really fun to listen to.
Oh, so you can get that on the website. It's not through Amazon or
Audible. We just recorded it as a podcast, so it was a fun 2-year period of every 2 weeks my parents would record the next episode, I would edit it and then post it up. So it's available as a podcast on the Apple and Spotify and all those.
Where your finer podcasts are available.
Exactly.
I'm a big podcast listener, so I'm going to download this one and add it to my list. I've got a long list of podcasts to listen to. Excellent. Thank you for coming on the program again, and thank you for your journey and sharing it with the world.
Thanks very much for listening to what we have to share about our Land Rover, both in the past and in the future. And we wish you well.
Thank you very much for your listening to this, sharing our memories today.
On his triumphant return to the podcast, it's Alex Bescoby. He's in Dorset, England. Welcome back, Alex.
Oh, thank you, John. It's so good to be back. And thanks to everyone listening.
Absolutely.
It's been a little bit of a hiatus in the middle, but we are back.
Yeah. What happened? It's been like 3 or 4 years. Did anything go on? Did you do anything interesting?
There was some sort of dead time in the middle.
Well, for the listeners who don't know, let me just set the stage. We've been following Oxford, the first Overland, extensively on the show. That's how we got a connection with you. Very proud to have Tim Slesser on the program. And that's the last time you were on. It was you were about to begin the last Overland, which was taking Oxford from Singapore back to London. And so that's setting the stage for our listeners who may be not familiar with I don't know how our listeners would not know what Oxford and Last Overland is by now, but give us a little bit about the background, how that started, what was the impetus and how did it go?
Gosh, big questions. No,
exactly.
So it was 3 years ago and a little bit when we were chatting. I think we were just about to go. We were just about to fly Singapore to obviously the rather silly undertaking of then driving back to the UK.
Who does that?
Somebody who's happy to have chronic back problems the rest of his life. Yeah, we were about to go. We'd obviously, our intention was to recreate the first Overland and to do that in the original car, Oxford, the 1955 Series 1 Land Rover, this beautiful thing that had been rescued from St Helena and restored. And it's a miraculous story all on its own by a brilliant Yorkshireman called Adam Bennett, who I know you've had on here before. Then to do it also, not just in the original car, but even more ridiculous, to redo it with one of the original crew, so 87-year-old Tim Slesser. And that was when we spoke, that was the plan. What happened next is we got to...
well placement of an Adam phrase. What happened next was?
What happened next was nothing went to plan, basically. We were about to start off on our 13,000 miles, 23 country, 111-day jaunt across the world. And Tim, poor chap, fell seriously ill the morning we were leaving. Ended up getting carted straight to a Singaporean hospital. But by this time, we'd sort of set the wheels in motion. We had about 2,000 people down at the Singapore Grand Prix and 95 Land Rovers all lined up in a big line behind Oxford, ready to go at 11 a.m. on that morning. I had to, at the very last minute, sort of with Tim's permission and blessing, was to rope in his 21-year-old grandson to stand in his place until Tim was better. And Nat George ended up going on what can only be described as a sort of gap year of his life. An extraordinary substitution at the very final minute. But we did. I said, so 3 years ago and a bit, we were pulling through Singapore. They closed the streets for us. We had all these cars behind us, Singaporean police. It was extraordinary.
It was quite the send-off. I saw the pictures. I saw some of it live streamed at the time. It was that was very nice.
Extraordinary. I had an inkling, obviously, about the sort of, the fan base for the first Overland. We'd been sort of working on the story for 18 months and I knew the sort of pedigree that I was stepping into just, with Tim and I never quite, even then I was blown away by the depth of love for this story, particularly in Southeast Asia, that there were people there who had remembered welcoming Tim home in 1956.
There were people that met Tim and had a signed book from Tim,
precisely.
Like the first edition. I was like stunned. I should say that I've watched the first 2 episodes of the show.
Excellent.
Even though it's not officially available in the United States.
I do not condone, but I also do not judge.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes. By the way, the TV show, I think you did a great job. I only was able to see 2 so far because for reasons, and really cool. I thought you did a nice job. It's nice, because it's interesting. How do you service the community, but also service folks that are not familiar with Oxford and would, there are people in the community that would just like to see the truck drive for 3 hours and they would be content with that and happy with that.
No, absolutely. Well, I know I was definitely, taking on a sort of national treasure, an international treasure. And I was really, really sort of aware of that before, during, and after, when we were putting the book and the series together, that, you know, not only were we sort of walking in Attenborough's shoes, but we were walking in, you know, sort of 65 years of fan club. You know, Oxford is an iconic Land Rover. The first Overland is a sort of, you know, part of the core text of the Land Rover religion. I mean, you're really sort of taking on quite a weight, but you know, that's why it was so important, I think, you know, to have Tim involved and to have his blessing and to have his guidance. You know, he's an incredible filmmaker, an incredible author in his own right, and you know, he advised me on, you know, film structure. He read my book. He penned my book. Oh, you know, nice. front to back. He wrote the foreword to it. Yeah, I think you're right. There were lots of people we were trying to, I guess, keep on board in the sense that, you know, like you say, like those that really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts, but at the same time to bring a whole new audience in. You know, and I think what's lovely is the range of people that have had messages from since, you know, from all over the world, men and women, you know, young and old, who've all looked into the show or the book and found something very different, whether that be the car story, whether that be the travel story, whether that be the story of Nat and Tim, you know, that grandfather-grandson sort of dynamic, which I think is just extraordinary. And it was completely accidental, brought a depth to it. The historians who wanted to, you know, learn how the world had or hadn't changed. And it just became this like multi-dimensional caravan of craziness. And I'm really glad that it's now finally out in the world, because there were many points, you know, in the last 3 years, I think since we got back, that it might never, you know, the book might have stayed on my desktop as a Word document. The film might have stayed on hard drives. It was a hell of a slog to get them out there. But, you know, I can now sort of die happy knowing that, like, you know, we did it and the story is out there, and you know, that people can hopefully enjoy both the series and the book for years to come, I hope.
So you have written a book and there's a TV show. And so the big question for especially our U.S. listeners is, will it be available in the United States and Canada?
Absolutely both. I'm hoping to come over in the new year. I'm desperate to come. I've heard January 1st, actually, is when it will be officially on sale in the US, the book, The Last Overland. The TV show, I hope, will be very, very closely behind it. I'm doing my best. So for those, so I get a lot of messages from people saying, you know, why can't we see it in, you know, here and here? And I say, I actually have no control over that. So as part of my sort of pound of flesh for getting the money together to be able to edit it, I mean, you might know this, you know, we had to sell various rights and this sort of thing to be able to do that. I only was able to keep hold of the UK rights. So I was only able to decide when and where it would go in the UK. I have sold it to, almost pawned it essentially, to a wonderful outfit called E1, who they're a cracking team, you know, and this is their job. They saw potential in it when nobody else would, and they have taken it on now, and their job is to sell it internationally. So I've no doubt it'll be coming to the US at the start of the year, because, and I hope it does, and I hope I can come over and do some showings over there, because I know there's such a good Land Rover community in the US.
North America clubs are planning a Land Rover 75th Jubilee event in June.
Interesting.
We already have the date. We already have the location, and it's going to be in Greek Peak, New York. It's a resort. It's in Cortland. It's near Ithaca. It's near Syracuse. Probably maybe an hour and a half out of New York City was my guess. It's about 6 hours from my house in Pittsburgh. We anticipate having 400 to 500 trucks, maybe 1,000 people there.
Oh, count me in.
It's going to be an event.
Can I come? Oh, well, I would love to. It would be amazing.
That might be something where maybe we could get a screening, maybe? Something?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We can do screenings, we can do book signings, we could get the team out together, and let's see. That'd be super fun. I would love that.
Maybe we get Tim to come.
Well, I hope so. No, so Tim turned 91 on...
Is he 91
Saturday.
now?
He's 91 on October 1st.
Wow.
So he's 3 weeks into his 91st year.
Oh, happy birthday, Tim.
Oh, extraordinary, man. I mean, for those who... Sorry, I know we're jumping around, but we had, you know, after all this time, I said there were many, many moments when we thought that the book and the series would just never see the light of day, even though I was banging my head against the wall for 3 years trying to get it away. we finally, after sort of months and months, we spent 10 months in the edit with the films. I spent 2 years writing the book, and we finally launched it all at the Royal Geographical Society in London on September 29th, so just a few weeks ago. It was absolutely extraordinary. We had the whole place, for about 700 people turned up to watch the first episode and see the book. And obviously the star guest was Tim Slessor. Tim has this habit of sort of providing extra jeopardy at the key moments. And rather like when he fell ill just before the Overland expedition, about 3 weeks before the launch party, when everything was coming out, he had a tumble outside his home. He's an extraordinary sort of fit, determined man, and he goes walking every day, and he just tripped up outside his home, bust his arm and his hip, and ended up in hospital. Which for anyone who knows Tim, he's just sort of 110% vinegar and willpower. And it was such a knock. And, a lot of people say, if you fall at 90 years old, it's the end. And this, I knew that it wouldn't be. But I thought that he's going to be so gutted because they're saying 6 weeks before he can get out of bed, and this sort of thing. And he's definitely going to miss the launch party. And I knew how much he wanted to be there. And I knew how much everyone else wanted to be there. And I wanted to be there. You know what? He discharged himself at 2:00 on the day. He walked out on a stick, got in the shower, walked after 3 weeks in bed, walked into the RGS and sat down to a standing ovation in front of 700 people and watched this show, which he'd never seen. And it gives me goosebumps just telling you the story now. It was absolutely extraordinary. The man has he knows how to create a show, that man. Dramatic moment, and it was, I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. And he's fine now. He's had a couple more weeks in sort of, with family and stuff, just recuperating, but he's now back at home living happily, by himself, looking after himself, and just extraordinary.
That is extraordinary. That's great. I'm glad he's doing well, recovering well, and rehabbing. What did he think of the book? What did he think of the TV show?
Well, you know what? I actually just had, because I've been pretty much non-stop since the 29th. I've been on tour, so I've been all over the country promoting the show and the book. So I haven't seen him yet, but I spoke to him on the phone, and he's fine. As I said, he read the book. And as I said, he penned it all the way through. But it was really important for me to go through that process because for those who do get to read it, it's very personal, about him. And I said, it's not just a car journey. Let's put it that way. And I wanted him to be happy with that as a sort of, we're very different generations. And I'm not saying it's anyway a sort of millennial bleed, but it's very much, there's more personal info on show, as you might expect, between 1955 and 2019. And I did, I wondered how he'd like the style. And actually, he was wonderful. He really he's made the book, and he wrote the foreword, which means he must have. And the show, I just had a phone call from his grandson when I was driving down here, because both of us have been a little nervous, because Tim is a filmmaker, spent 30 years at the BBC. He knows how to cut a film. And he's watched all episodes now, and we've had the thumbs up.
Oh, great.
I think all he said was, could we have some more? Which is always a nice thing. People go, well, we would like more. So
I don't know how you took all that journey and stuck it into, was basically 4 hours. I know they're like 47 minutes a piece, but only four episodes. That's had been incredibly difficult to, and I'm sure there are things you cut that you really wish you could have saved. That's not an easy choice. No,
and you're right. I mean, I said it took 9 to 10 months, 2 months per episode, basically. Slightly more, so much of that was just reducing this down and watching through the footage and then arguing about what should and shouldn't go in. And at the end of the day, you said it at the beginning, got to remember that the vast majority of people who will be coming to this don't know Land Rover, they don't know Oxford, they don't know Tim. You've got to pitch the story in a certain way that gets people in fast, and then once you've got them in, keeps them there. And so we are, you might see, we're covering huge distances in short amounts of time.
Right. Yeah. It was like Myanmar, India, done. Like,
yeah. Yeah. But, there was also, there's a certain, you certainly don't want it to drag either. It's always good to leave people wanting more, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm really proud of the book, because I think the book for me gives allowed me to go into much more depth, particularly on the history, because that's my real passion. I'm definitely, I was a historian first and then a Land Rover fan, later in life. Obviously driving Oxford for 4 months certainly, made me fall in love all over again. And I really get it now. I think that's what I would put my hands up. I grew up in a family of fanatics, and like anyone who's sort of like a teenager, you sort of rebel against what your dad. It's quite the opposite of what Vicky said in episode 1, or maybe, when you're a teenager, my dad loves it, so I'm not going to love it. And I had the most incredible reinduction into the world and the religion of Land Rover. And I, as I say in the book towards the end, I really understand that these cars, above all, they come with these sort of memories. These like cobwebs of memories all over them, of family, of, my granddad had one, my uncle had one, my dad had one, my brother had one. I bought this because it was exactly the same as one he had, or I inherited it from him, or I remember driving around with my mum in these, and it's this wonderful piece of home that you can take away with you. And that for me was just what after 4 months driving around, and listening to story after story of people sharing their kind of come to Land Rover moment, it was such a privilege.
I was struck by a couple things in the 2 episodes that I've seen, which is, and we talked about this earlier, the folks that recognized what was happening, and you had folks ready to go as soon as you entered into a country or a town. It seemed that there were, Land Rover people were there. I assume you probably had some advance notice, but aside from that, I mean, hey, they're coming to town. That's a smart move, but it's still kind of shocking to see them show up and new, and people had a copy of the first edition. And then the house they stayed at, that was a cottage of some sort, and you were in the same cottage that Tim and the guys were at. It was just that struck me. It's very well done in the video. Well put together. You.
Well, no, I think that was really important. It was because Tim falls out of the story physically on day 1. Not to spoil the show for everyone. The challenge was always, or not the challenge, I mean, what I wanted to do, both while we were on the journey and then when I was writing the book and making the film, was keep Tim in the story and the first Overland, not just Tim, but all 6 of them. And we obviously gifted with this incredible footage from the 50s, which it's worth its weight in gold for the visual impact and the nostalgia and it has, and so always when we were editing the book and the series, we need to keep coming back to that.
And that was also well done, by the way, weaving in the old footage with the new. Great job. That was the first thing that I really enjoyed. I loved how you did that. That was nice. You would show pictures of them and a video of them in a certain place, and you go back to it and you show the current now. And I thought that was a highlight so far that I've seen.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, our goal was use every damn minute of it we can, bleed it,
right.
bleed it.
Right.
It was just such a gift. And, as a historian, that visual history for me was just endlessly fascinating I would just sit in the edit. I was there almost every single day for, 9 or 10 months, and I just go back over and over it again. And just, I'd be writing the voiceover, just thinking and it was when I was writing the book, sort of, I was finishing the book at the same time and just sort of immersing myself in that old footage, just watching it. There's no sound to it, so you're just watching this silent color footage and just thinking my God, what a different world. And Nat says it in episode 1 about his granddad saying, it's really hard to think that he was our age once, so it sounds such a simple thing to say, but I found it such a profound thing to hear, because I was like, actually, you're absolutely right. I know this guy, as a 91-year-old, quite frail now, old man, still sharp as hell. But to have this footage of him and have it on a huge cinema screen of him sort of skipping around in Thailand, or mucking about, jumping over fences in Burma. And and looking at these photos, you think that's the same guy. I thought it's such a gift,
Any highlights that stand out for you? I know you spent a lot of time in Myanmar, and I guess you've lived there for a period of time, but any other highlights stand out for you? Or how about this? Anything that highlights that stand out for you that you had to cut?
There's a lot more of, I think, people just suffering. which I think I was just getting like post facto Schadenfreude, just looking at everyone having a terrible time. No, you know what? I think the thing that was really hard there was a lot of time in workshops, and I think, for the Centresteer audience, I know you'd probably love to see just the sheer amount of workshops that we spent time in. I mean, you'll see in episode 4, we get a real proper workshop scene, and it's great, but we just, and particularly the Channel 4's feedback was, you can only have so much car nerdery. That's what they would call it. You got to keep people on board, and I was like no, but actually, first of all, I know that this is wonderful audience of people who want to know exactly. And actually, there's another episode 3, with this wonderful DIY LPG conversion in Uzbekistan, which I loved. And I fought for those moments, that I want people to know what the car was doing, how the car was behaving, and how we were dealing with it. I put my hands up first that I am not the most experienced mechanic, but by God, did I learn a lot about how to keep a Series 1 on the road. But also, the most incredible thing was the interactions that Oxford allowed us to have that transcended language, because you get someone who doesn't speak English, but it's like, can speak Land Rover, and they're like, our doc, our mechanic, the doc, Dr. Sill, he is himself a celebrity in the Land Rover world, but the doc's English is fine. It's like he perfectly communicate, but the doc was speaking Land Rover in 23 countries, and he was understood perfectly. And I loved that. It was like a universal language. So yeah, I would love to have got loads more workshop time in, because by gosh, there was a lot.
Yeah. maybe too much.
Maybe too much.
Yeah, well, when Oxford came to the US, there was plenty of that also here.
Well, I think I should say I apologize to David Short and the team, because I know I apologized to him at the time, because obviously it went straight. I think it was in the UK for about 2 weeks before it was then put in a box and shipped off. And obviously Oxford was carrying all the battle scars of 4 months on the road and sticky tape and this sort of thing. And I never got the chance to actually, I think, do the work that we should have done. And then I know that what David and the guys did, first of all, was give her kind of intensive care, the poor old girl. But it was so good to see her ride again so quickly, even through COVID. And I thought just the tenacity of David and the guys was wonderful. Couldn't given that she was a bit crippled, I think couldn't have landed in better hands.
Yep. Well, it's been limping along. I mean, it limped along through here.
More than limping. I mean, she's been skipping through New Zealand, Australia. Yeah.
It's good that Adam Bennett has allowed the world to experience and enjoy Oxford, and I was very privileged to be able to drive it for a period of time, and it was very exciting.
Well, it would not have happened without him.
Yes.
None of this would happen without
Absolutely.
him. I'd just say the book is already, I'm delighted to say, a bestseller here in the UK, which is wonderful. I hope it repeats the trick elsewhere. That would be nice.
Well, there certainly is a lot of interest here in the U.S. for Oxford. I guess actually that's one thing I thought of in seeing the video in your TV show and talking about Oxford. Oxford and the first Overland was never really that big here in the U.S. prior, because Land Rovers were low on the totem pole of car ownership here in the U.S.
Sadly, something we need to change, but yeah.
Yes, well, Jeeps are big here. That's where they started, and they're still a thing. There's a Bantam JeepFest just an hour north of me, because that's where Jeep started, up in Butler, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. So yes, yeah. I find that interesting. I don't know that you would have gotten the same general populace coming out to see Oxford as it would drive around if it had done the same trip, say, through the U.S., because all that history is not here for the first Overland. We're trying to fix that.
Yeah. I mean, there is another great journey that I would love to obviously perhaps recreate, is the 1971 to Blashford Snell, the Darien Gap. I mean, what a journey that is. I actually had the great privilege to sit on that car the other day. Phil Bashall from the Dunsfold collection popped down to a festival I was speaking at, and I got to sit on it. There is Land Rover pedigree if you scratch the surface, but I said that was the great blessing, I think, of being able to recreate the first Overland and to start in Southeast Asia, because we forget that obviously the world has changed so much since 1955. Singapore was a British colony, as was Malaya, and obviously we talk a lot about decolonization and these negative legacies, but what we saw down there, obviously, was the passage of time had been so great that actually there was this fondness for both the car, the story, and it sort of transcended any sort of post-colonial grief, I think. And, like you say, like it didn't matter that it was Brits and whatever. It just was just a bloody great adventure at a time when when exploration and adventure was still something that you could really talk about. The idea of exploration in the 21st century is something very different. To be able to sort of bring back those ghosts, it was just such a blessing, I would say.
Absolutely. It was inspired to go to have it kind of return Oxford back to the UK. I think that was an inspired way to handle the last
Tim's idea.
Oh, was it?
Tim's idea. It was Tim's idea, yeah.
So where can folks find the book? Even I guess we could get it off of Amazon out of the UK.
You can get it on Amazon. You can. And I'm sure they will ship. It will be in stores from January, and I will update you guys as soon as I have those. Obviously, if people want the best news, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at The Last Overland. Please do. There's also, if you go on our website, there's a mailing list, and I very, very sparingly update that. I don't abuse people's inboxes. I only send anything out when we have some sort of solid news to share about events or new showings, where the book's coming, where the series is coming. So if people want to be first to know, please sign up to the newsletter. Well, I said I hope to be out myself in the States in sort of the first quarter of next year. That would be cracking. And then if not for June, that would be amazing.
I think you should strongly consider June.
I think consider it strongly considered.
You will have a very captive audience and a very engaged audience.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Well, John, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, all of you, for sticking with this journey. I know it's not often that people have the patience to, I guess, 3 years to wait for something to come back. But I guess people were waiting 70 years. So, what's three? What's three?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks very much. We appreciate you coming back on the program, giving us the update, and I'll have links, of course, in the show notes to all this. So thanks very much.
My pleasure. Cheers, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
We hope you enjoyed show number 115 for October 2022. Want to thank Alec and Jan Forman and also their son Charles for talking to us about the Kickstarter and trying to get their Series 3 restored and back on the road. It's a storied truck that doesn't have as much of the notoriety as Oxford does, but I think it should, because it's done a lot. They've crossed the Sahara not once, twice.
Exactly.
How many people can say they crossed the Sahara and then twice?
And while it didn't make it to Antarctica, Alec did.
Yes, exactly. Right. And if we get it back on the road, maybe it can finally find its way down to Antarctica. Maybe it can get there before Oxford does. We should have a little race. I'm not in control of anything, but that'd be a cool idea. And also thanks to Alex Bescoby for joining us to talk to us about the final Overland and the upcoming book and the television show. If you are in North America, there are ways to watch the television show. I do not condone, nor do I encourage you to use those methods. But having seen 2 episodes so far, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done. It's tough to thread that needle between being engaging and also servicing the Land Rover enthusiasts, but I thought they did a pretty good job of doing that.
Yeah, and I look forward to the book. We could order it from Amazon UK or something like that now, but I look forward to the US press of that, or release of that book. I'm sure that the red pen copy that Tim went over for him is probably a prized possession at this point.
And thanks to you, Morgan, for coming on the podcast also. Can't forget that.
Well, thank you for having me, as always.
And to the One True Packs for his continued production support, making us sound well, I hope. And because when I do the editing, I'm reminded I need to stay close to the microphone. Sometimes I don't do that while I'm speaking. Visit our website, Centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed in today's podcast. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and voicemail. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/Centresteer. You can buy us a t-shirt, sticker, or buy us a tee. Click on store on the menu of our webpage. If you have an idea for a guest, send us the details and contact information if you have it. We do appreciate those. In honor of Land Rover's 75th anniversary, you're now invited to bring your Land Rover, specifically especially Series and Defender owners, Freelanders too, Range Rovers, Discoveries, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in 2023. You now have
8 months, 8 short months.
And you also have 7 months to prepare for a NARC's Diamond Jubilee. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
You may now resume your important things.
It was just a bloody great adventure.